Now, when I was a child, I had a wonderful book, a much-thumbed ladybird book called The Story of Nuclear Power. It was published in 1972, and I used to go through it again and again, and I was enthralled to read how scientists split the atom here in the UK for the first time. And they did it at the Cavendish laboratories in Cambridge. And I noted that the world's first civilian nuclear reactor, the first civilian nuclear power station, was at Calder Hall in Cumbria, now of course Sellafield. And I look back at the optimism that you see on every page of that book, and I look at what has happened since, and at the short-termism of successive British governments and their failure to do justice to our pioneering nuclear history, and their abject failure to think of the needs of future generations, above all of the families that are today struggling with the cost of energy in this country. And I feel like one of those beautifully drawn illustrations in that ladybird book of what happens in a nuclear pile when the graphite rods are taken out at the wrong moment, and my blood starts to boil and steam comes out of my ears, and I think I'm going to melt down. And I ask myself a question: what happened to us? When Sizewell opened in 1966, it was the 8th reactor that this country had built in just 7 years. Why have we never got back to that kind of rhythm? Have we lost the gumption and dynamism of our parents and grandparents? It gets worse. When Sizewell B, fantastic white dome, was completed in 1995, it was the 5th reactor in 7 years. Now, remember, 1995, an era that was technologically so primitive that people used to use things called car phones and went down to Blockbusters to rent VHS videos. Think of the colossal technical progress in other areas and contrast the paralysis in British nuclear energy. How many new nuclear power stations have we built in the 27 years since? How many have been connected to the grid? How many slices of bread can we toast with the additional nuclear power we've created? How many washing machines can we power? How many families have been helped with extra nuclear energy? The answer is none. Zero. Zilch. The French, who have loads of nuclear power stations already, have built 4 more since 1995, bringing their total reactor fleet up to about 56. The Indians have added about 12. The Chinese have built more than 50 additional nuclear reactors since 1995. And you know why we failed? It's not even as though we have some cultural aversion to nuclear power. I mean, I just met those nice protesters outside. It wasn't kind of Atomkraft Nein Danke. There wasn't some lefty thing. They seem to be objecting to the disruption to the roads. It's pure NIMBYism out there. That's not the issue. I will diagnose the problem. It's called myopia. It's called short-termism. It's a chronic case of politicians not being able to see beyond the political cycle. For 13 years, the previous Labour government did absolutely nothing to develop this country's nuclear industry. They said it didn't make economic sense. I think they even said that in their manifesto. Well, thanks a bunch, Tony, and thanks a bunch, Gordon. Tell that to British businesses and industries that are now desperately short of affordable and reliable electricity. Tell that to families that are struggling with the cost of heat and light this winter. And they're not the only culprits, because in the run-up to the 2010 election, as you'll have seen, famous video on YouTube now, Nick Clegg, the then leader of the Liberal Democrats, now some kind of tech lobbyist in California, I understand, said that the UK shouldn't build more nuclear power stations like Sizewell C. And he didn't say it was unsafe. He didn't have what he called a theological objection. He said that the problem was that it wouldn't even be completed. No point starting it, he said, because it wouldn't even be completed until, guess when? 2021 or 2022. So, gee, thanks, Nick. And it's because of that kind of myopia that here in the country that first split the atom, we have only 15% of our energy from nuclear and of our electricity from nuclear, and it is falling. Whereas in France it is at 70%, and we ask ourselves why France is more self-reliant than ourselves when it comes to energy, and why they find it relatively easier to hold down costs. Yes, nuclear always looks, when you begin, it always looks relatively expensive to build and to run. But it is, look at what's happening today. Look at the results of Putin's war. It is certainly cheap by comparison with hydrocarbons today. In fact, if Hinkley Point C were already running this year, been delayed for ages and ages, of course, it would be cutting fuel bills by £3 billion. I'll say it again. If Hinkley Point C were running now, it would be cutting our national fuel bills by £3 billion. So you have to look ahead and you have to beware of the false economy. If you have an old kettle that takes ages to boil, it may cost you £20 to replace it. But if you get a new one, you'll save £10 a year for every year on your £10 a year every year on your electricity bill. And I remember when the government finally did the deal on Hinkley C. In fact, I think I was already sitting in the cabinet, and I remember some people protesting then about the strike price that we did, £92.50 per kilowatt hour. It was very, very expensive. But it doesn't look very expensive today. That's why we need to pull our national finger out and get on with Sizewell C. That's why we're putting £700 million into the deal, just part of the £1.7 billion of government funding available for developing a large-scale nuclear project to final investment stage, FID, in this Parliament. And in the course of the next few weeks, I am absolutely confident that it will get over the line. And we will get it over the line because it will be absolute madness not to. This project will create tens of thousands of jobs, but it will also power 6 million homes. That is roughly a fifth, 6 million homes, roughly a fifth of all the homes in the UK. So it will help to fix the energy needs, not just of this generation, but of the next. A baby born this year will be getting energy from Sizewell C long, long after she retires. And this new reactor is just a part of our great British nuclear campaign. We will build a reactor a year again. We will build them across the country, at least 8 of them, large ones and small modular reactors. And of course, they're not the entire solution to our energy needs, far from it. Yes, we are increasing our own domestic hydrocarbons. We've got more gas out of the North Sea this year than last year, considerably more, 26% more. We're putting a big bet, as you know, on hydrogen, on carbon capture and storage. And because of the activism of the government, we're now racing towards our target, and we will hit it, of 50 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. 50 gigawatts is a huge amount. I mean, that's roughly half the electricity consumption of this country from offshore wind. And I tell everybody who thinks hydrocarbons are the only answer, and we should, get fracking and all that. Offshore wind is now the cheapest form of electricity in this country. Offshore wind is 9 times cheaper than gas. I'll say it again. Offshore wind is now 9 times cheaper than gas because of the insanity of what Putin has done. And that's why it makes sense for us to become more self-reliant. And of course, it's entirely clean and green. So renewables are not only helping us to defeat climate change, they're also helping to keep bills lower now than they would otherwise be in this crisis. What Putin has done is to launch a kind of kamikaze attack on the world economy. He doesn't care how much pain Russia suffers. He believes that ultimately we will flinch, that Western politicians don't have the stomach for the fight. He believes that we will give up on Ukraine, give in to his aggression, and go back to mainlining his hydrocarbons. And I have to tell you, he is wrong. He's wrong in his assumption about the British people. I think he's wrong in his assumption about other European governments too, by the way. I talked to Olaf Scholz last night, and it's absolutely clear that Germany is resolute in moving away from dependence on Russia. And Putin, in this strategy, is going to fail. So we're helping people now with the cost of living, and of course there will be more cash to come, whoever takes over from me in the months ahead. Substantial sums, that's absolutely clear. But even more important than that, our British energy security strategy, Great British Nuclear, is rectifying the chronic mistakes of the past. taking the long-term decisions that this country needs. And I would say, frankly, folks, over the last 3 years that this government has done some pretty difficult things, and we've done some of the hardest tasks that you can set politicians. We fixed our relations with the European Union. We settled that argument pretty conclusively. We got Brexit done and took back control of our lawmaking, even though we knew it would not be easy. We opened up our economy post-COVID faster than any other major country because of the speed of our vaccine rollout. We led the whole of Europe in helping the Ukrainians and in standing up to Putin, in seeing the wisdom from the start, in arming them and assisting them. And at every stage in the last 3 years, and I hope I can say this, given this one will be one of my last speeches in this office, at every stage what we've tried to do is put in the things that this country will need for the long term, to try to look at what future generations will need for their prosperity, their productivity, and for their quality of life, and to reduce the cost of living as well. So whether that's gigabit broadband gone up from 7% penetration to 70% of premises now, 3 new high-speed rail lines, investing massively in this country's ability to make its own vaccines, fixing social care, coming up with a solution for that problem. I think it'd be fair to say this government has not shirked the big decisions. We've raised our eyes, we've looked to the horizon. And I just say, whoever follows me next week, I know that they will do the same. So no more national myopia, no more short-termism. Let's think about the future. Let's think about our kids and our grandchildren, about the next generation. And so I say to you, with the prophetic candour and clarity of one who is about to hand over the torch of office, I say go nuclear and go large and go with Sizewell C. Thank you all very much. Thank you.